calling to order the Fort River Building Committee meeting for March 12th, 2018. I am Jonathan Salva, interim chair, and we do not have name tags today because I forgot to bring the name tags that Nicole was very good to give to me, so we'll have to kind of announce ourselves probably. Do our best to not confuse folks. Oh, and there's Eric. So the meeting minutes came, oh, sorry.
Just have to announce the table.
Oh, yes, and this meeting is being videotaped by Media. The first item on the agenda, and actually, does anyone want agendas? Yes, we printed out agendas. This way and half that way, something like that. There's a couple more. I hope you should
short-headed chair. Go from down here.
So the first item tonight is approving the minutes from last time, which went out a little late, but hopefully folks had an opportunity to review them, and if there aren't any things, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public comments. Do we have any public comment today? Next item is choose a new chair, or a new interim chair, or at least discuss how we're going to handle that. And I can only stay till 5:30 today, which is part of my concern about kind of staying on longer, depending on the timing of things. It's just, I don't want to, as I said last time, commit to this role if I can't stay for a whole meeting, and we have to be flexible about our meeting times. Does anyone want to volunteer?
Can I propose something? Considering that we are low on 3 members at this point, I don't know if you would be willing to hold on being interim for a little bit longer until we fill out the vacancies and everybody's voting. That's a proposal, but I don't know how the rest of the people, the committee feel. And you?
I mean, I'd be open to that. The only concern is how technically to handle if I have to leave earlier than the meeting goes
like
on.
Today,
for example, yes.
We'd elect the vice chair, and the vice chair would take over in the absence of the chair.
There you go. So we have to move to do that, and then someone has to volunteer to do that, and then we have to vote on that, just to keep my rules right in my head. Would anyone like to move to consider having a vice chair? Not actually volunteer for the position, but to put forward the notion that we would do this.
So moved.
Okay. Anyone else?
And this might also help, we're discussing it now, since we've had trouble filling the role of chair, a vice chair, it might also help with some of the duties, so that might make the chair role slightly more accessible.
Yeah.
So I second the motion.
Do we want to have any more discussion? Or shall I move it to a vote on that topic? Okay. All in favor?
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this meeting likely to go to 6:30?
I don't know.
The reason I'm asking is I think you and I need to leave at like 6:15.
I actually have to leave earlier because I have another commitment in between.
You're kidding me.
Those are the
You
worst,
do?
right? Who don't
You're like
make those
triple
decisions,
booking on
you
us? Dude. Well, anyways, I need to leave around 6:15.
Okay. Well, I will try to move this as quick as we can, because I think there's probably some interest to get done.
The reason I'm saying that is because if the interest is pinch hitting as a facilitator, I'm happy to pinch hit as a facilitator.
Okay.
If no one minds, I mean, if people mind, then I won't do it. Obviously, I wouldn't get elected.
General discussion on efficiency, do we need 2 hours to discuss the various topics every other week?
I think it's good to have the time blocked out, but I don't think we'll always use it. I mean, I know that the working group that was looking at the RFP was looking to do like a short 1-hour meeting fairly soon, as in next week if we can get the doodle poll out, for example. So I don't know that we always need an hour-long or 2-hour-long meeting.
So just 2 notes. One is the doodle poll went out this afternoon.
Oh, did it?
Yes.
Okay.
The second point, and was the vote that just happened, I'm sorry, I missed the wording, for an interim vice chair or for someone who's going to be a vice chair long-term? I think it's just, and I don't want to parse it, but I think people might view it differently if this is an interim till we get full membership and then all that happens up, or is this more like someone who's willing to be vice chair long-term?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm liking the idea that the vice chair position is kind of more ongoing. I think it would make it more accessible
Yeah.
for those of us who are parents, especially to consider being chair longer term.
Were you volunteering to do that? When you said facilitator, is that vice
Yeah,
chair?
well, yeah. I mean, to me, the role, I mean, since the chair would be making the agendas and doing the other sort of like heavy organizing lifting, the vice chair in this context, I would assume, would basically be if somebody needs to leave at 5:30 or 5 or can't make a meeting, then I basically just run the parliamentary procedure to make sure the meeting runs on schedule, and nothing, in my view, nothing else. I'm not, if there was any, not to make this overly long, but if there was any inference that I was trying to actually influence the deliberations in some way through taking that role, I would not do it because I wouldn't want to give that impression.
So I nominate Eric to be vice chair.
A second.
Oh, can we just for just another second? If having someone that would do like the inverse of doing some of the heavy lifting to do agendas and follow up some of the work, would that allow someone, would someone in this group be more willing to be a chair if those sorts of duties could be helped along by a vice chair? Would that help us get a permanent chair? Does that make any difference to anybody here as far as taking on the role of chair?
I think maybe we could have a broader discussion about the two roles in the short term. For me, it would be helpful just to know that someone could cover the meetings. It hasn't been too bad, snowstorms notwithstanding, to get the agenda put together, get it out. You know, I may not be able to do as much on the working group as I thought I was going to do, but maybe we can come back when we have a fuller complement of committee members about this.
I mean, if for no other reason, just to kind of get us moving
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
people have to leave, so. How about if Eric does it for today, we can always kick him off later.
That would be awesome.
Throw 'em out, yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, so I think we had a motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I can leave at 5:30. Which brings us to committee membership. I don't think there's going to be much to report because the school committee didn't get to meet last week, and it's coming back up tonight, I think, or no?
It'll either be,
Thursday,
okay.
maybe it was.
Either be tomorrow night if Amherst School Committee meets tomorrow night, or
Okay.
Wednesday night if tomorrow doesn't happen because of snow.
And for those who are interested in knowing, there's a custom that when school is canceled for the day, the evening meetings are canceled as well.
Yeah.
So even if the snow's tailing off tomorrow evening, if the school's canceled tomorrow night, I think school committee tomorrow night. The other thing too is this did come up in our meeting. We discussed it briefly, and if anyone remembers, like the formation of this committee itself, there was a really long public process and long deliberation by the committee to figure out who was on it, and so members of the school committee were reluctant. What we said last time, the committee members were actually reluctant to say, "Oh yeah, that's fine. We'll no longer take any interest in who you're appointing, and we'll just hear about it." I don't know how that conversation is going to play itself out. So we're just going to. I mean, because it wasn't on the agenda. It was literally a report out of an issue. We didn't debate it. So we'll talk about it and we'll get back to you.
The only other question I kind of have related to that is, are there functional things that we're going to run into besides just struggling with quorum for being what's now 3 people down?
I think it's really just the substantive input you'd like to have.
Yep.
I mean, that's why it'd really be nice to have. I guess it'd be 3 members of the Fort River community. Obviously, you're here, so. But I mean, because I was going to say 2 because we originally had like ideally a teacher and a
Right.
staff person who would be members of the committee.
Mhm.
So that's really it. I mean, we want to have that voice in as part of the process. It's
Mhm.
important.
Yeah, would agree. Okay, so it doesn't sound like we can get much further on this topic tonight. So in the interest of time, I guess we'll move on as long as folks are comfortable.
The only thing I was gonna say is that, you know, we can't guarantee resolution by next
Even at
meeting,
the
but I
next
think it's
meeting,
likely
sure.
that the committee, school committee will have, there'll be more to share back. So maintaining this agenda item on the next Fort River School Building Committee agenda would be my recommendation, even if the school committee needs more time. I can't forecast that, but
Okay.
it certainly will be a thorough discussion at the Amherst.
I hope we
School
resolve
Committee.
it.
Yeah.
Has anybody else expressed an interest?
There was a staff member who expressed an interest that Nicole passed along to the current chair
Yeah.
and myself. So
So
one staff member.
you mean a second person then?
No.
'Cause
Well,
we
at least
discussed
I've only
one
heard about
person
one.
last time.
One for one
Sa-
vacancy.
We're in the same boat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we-
Ideally.
So do we need to find a replacement for Claire because it has to come from a definite pool?
I
So-
think that comes from, that would come from I think that was a town-appointed position.
Yes, so we need to liaison with the town, ask them to nominate somebody else.
Like-
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Yeah.
no. That was
Okay,
a
so-
comment.
Yeah, so the town manager and I already had a conversation on this topic last week, and I think once the school committee makes their decision, the town manager and I agree there's some logic to how that might get filled. So we can, just a little, I don't want to go too far because the school committee has to weigh in, but we've already had that conversation, and I know the town manager, how he'd like to fill the vacancy.
But then as far as the other vacancy for the teacher or staff member, you still advertised again for that to try to
Yeah.
solicit?
And that's gone to now all schools.
All three Amherst Elementary
Yeah.
schools, yeah.
Okay.
For the last year.
I think we'll move on then, and down to the RFP draft review. Who wants to start that off?
Right, so I sent out a new draft of the RFQ last week. If anyone didn't bring a copy, there's 2 copies here, if anyone wants to, right over there. I am becoming happier with how this is coming out. We're starting to fill it in pretty well. As I mentioned last time, the areas that we're going to be most looking for feedback on are Part 1 and Part 3, especially Part 3. Because Part 3 is going to be how the evaluation subcommittee or task force or whatever that ends up being makes that decision as to who becomes a finalist and then how those finalists are ranked. I don't have too much to say about it. I have added in some pieces that I found from MSBA templates, from other towns, from the input that the task force continues to work on. So I am happy to receive any feedback on any part, anything anyone has to offer. So that's my
So just a couple points. One, we list specifically the structural, the geotechnical, and a couple of the disciplines, but we did not include architectural. Do we want to? If we're going to be looking at space, configuration, and so forth.
There's definitely some parts here that are kind of copied and pasted and maybe
Sure.
aren't integrated well, so that kind of feedback is definitely what we're looking for.
And then the factors, typically we run with 4, 5, 6, 7, manageable number, and then have all the detail that you've got in there as sub-factors. It just makes it a little easier to score. But otherwise, it went pretty good to me.
Your second point was about the objectives or about Part 3?
The evaluation. part
Okay,
three.
yeah, the evaluation was definitely given to you in a very broad and not, I wanted to throw as many ideas out as possible and for you guys to kind of narrow down what's important to you and what's important relative to other things. So
Okay.
definitely getting that down and getting the detail of what's great, what's good, what's bad will need to be part of this process.
Was there more than one version sent last week?
In the last week, no, only one version.
There was a version attached to the meeting minutes,
Mhm.
because that was a version presented at the last meeting.
I was just gonna say, this is different This is reading different than what I was reading earlier.
Do you want to go from the beginning and people go making comments sequential, or?
I don't think any.
Or is it easier to mark it up, send it to you, and incorporate?
That is the easiest way, but
I think we have to
Yeah.
deliberate in
Yeah, I think so too,
public.
Yes.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
So,
Well, why don't we go part by part, just so that
Okay.
it's a way to organize our talking. And so why don't we start with part one? Anyone have comments on part one?
I have a couple. One, at some point we need to decide on the lump sum fee that is going to be negotiated. I don't know if this is the time, but I think this is a discussion that we need to have. And then on the project objectives, there seems to be on the list 2 levels of objectives that some are very general, some are very extremely specific. So I don't know if some of those should be removed from the list. Because one very general is like a trips and fall hazards, and then you go into the details of the screens on the windows. So I think those are 2 levels of problems, and I think we should keep the overall picture not.
The high-level problems were kind of part of the early draft, and as time went on and I wanted more specificity, I pulled these out of our previous statements of interest.
Okay.
So I'd also be interested if all of these problems are still a complete description of what our current problems are, because this does go back to 2013 now, I think.
Yeah, because some of them are, for example, on the health, some of these, they might be addressed by the environmental study that we're using, so it would be a repetition of things. We don't want to don't pay for services, right?
So I would suggest that, you're speaking of the environmental study for
Yes.
indoor air, I would suggest that the indoor air quality study be given to this firm to use as background.
And so they need to still address the item,
Exactly.
but they may not be generating the data.
Exactly.
So there was interest in getting this RFQ out very soon, like a month or something. We won't have an environmental study.
Then we can say it will be provided by.
Yeah.
That would be a good assertion, right? So-
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that's true.
The other comment is the alarm system is mentioned twice. I think it has to be, the list has to be tightened.
It was mentioned twice in the statement of interest too, that there was a fire alarm and a burglar alarm. They were mentioned separately, so I
Okay.
kept them separate.
Yep.
I shouldn't really declare.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, so I'm sorry.
I wrote it down.
So just to piggyback on one of the points you made, just about the cost piece, I mean, I appreciate you bringing that up again, and I think having some comparables would be the only way to come up with that, and particularly with the net zero bylaw, just trying to see what's out there for buildings that have been built that would conform to that bylaw of similar size, because I think that's going to be a hard one to come to resolution on, unless we have some sense of what other people have done, other communities have done, to make sense. I think otherwise we're just coming up with numbers instead of having some data to base that decision on, those decisions. I don't, MSBA has a data pool, I'm not sure, data source for this, but, given the bylaw, I'm just not knowledgeable enough to know whether those buildings would fit within that, and that's what the servants, whether they'd be apples to apples comparison.
I mean, were you talking about the fee for the services as
Yes.
or the cost of construction? So you're
Now I was talking in this section about the fee for the services,
Okay, so there's.
but the other
okay.
one,
Yeah, that item can't really get filled in until we have like a broader discussion about how we see our budget being spent.
Yeah.
yeah.
Just to add 2 things. One is, thanks for that clarifier, and I was clear on that piece. What I meant to say is projects that we can't find MSBA that don't use an OPM that focus on this, so just getting a sense from other communities that have taken the route that this group has taken, so we get a sense of what that is. Because we don't have that, and I'm not here to critique the owner project manager choice, but we don't have that extra layer. So I think it behooves us, because that's who typically would, in this process, in my experience, would say, here's what a reasonable fee is, right? Because they're working in the field. luckily we have so many people here who work in the field, but trying to get a sense of what are other projects that have been done so that we can come up with a number that we feel like is defensible. Because we don't have someone doing that for us, so I think that'll be some work that the committee has to take on.
So we did do a draft of that.
Great.
We started basically working backwards from the money that we were given and carrying some line item guesstimates of what we thought we would be spending to see what was left for what we could assign to a fee.
And then think about whether that's
And
reasonable.
then figure out whether or not that was reasonable. And then the other thing that we, that Anthony was able to pull was the information, the invoices from the Wildwood project.
Right.
And because they're line items, we can subtract out the OPM costs
Right.
and just have, and they're also delineated by phase, so it's clear what was paid to the designers for schematic design. And it's more than what we have available when we account for the other line items that we think we might have to cover. But I can give you a verbal rundown of what we think that list is right now, if that's helpful for discussion.
It's probably something we should add to a formal agenda for another meeting. Can we do a verbal thing? I mean, it's kind of, is it a new item? I guess it's related to this item, so we could
I
we
think
could
it's
do that.
related, but
Yeah.
just to sketch it out for everyone in their mind. So we're holding a payment line item for the stenographer, for Amherst Media, for 2 indoor air quality testing, one in the spring and one in the fall, because those are probably the 2 wettest seasons and when we'll have the most likely different results. We also are holding a line item for additional testing, specifically asbestos. We are holding a line item for third-party independent cost estimating reconciliation, for advertising, for a surveyor, for a geotech, and then a small item for any legal counsel, should we need it, and an owner's contingency fee, which is right now 5% of the $250,000 total. And what's left is about $150,000 for the designer's fees. And so then comparing that to the Wildwood project. The Wildwood project was about 6 months of $32,000 worth of fees. And then there were 2 additional services. And I think that those, I forget exactly what that totaled out to be, but around 21,000 is what I'm recalling.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
And we can put that on the agenda for next time to talk more details.
And I can actually write it down.
Yeah.
We can share it.
Other comments in section 1?
So I just want to, I'm making a very large assumption on this because our roof is not mentioned in it, so I'm assuming that our roof issues are going to be completely resolved, separate from this whole project.
There will be additional effort beyond this project. I wouldn't suggest they'll be all resolved.
Right.
Okay.
So I wonder if we should include something about our roof?
Mike?
So just my perspective is, we now have, I don't know, 50-page analysis of the
Yes.
roof.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's, we know what the problems are. So in the capital request this year, there's been, I think patching is probably not the most articulate term for it.
That is an accurate term.
Okay,
Yes.
but in the capital, I'm trying to think of what year in the capital plan is the replacement.
22, I believe.
By 22. So in terms of this project, just my perspective would be, this is about planning and understanding what can be done. I think we have the information right now on the roof.
Okay.
So whether on the flip side of this, like if it's a renovation project, the roof would need to be included, but I think we have very up-to-date data
Great.
that an architect could see and say, oh yeah, this needs to be replaced as part of the project.
Yeah.
But in terms of the accumulating what the problems are, I think we have sufficient
We know that one.
information.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
So, as we are going to do with the environmental health assessment, we should probably note in the RFQ that a study has been performed.
Yeah.
We had done a detailed analysis, so they can find that.
In that same, if you don't mind, in that same spirit, it would make sense to list the roof under like structure
Yeah.
as a problem,
Mhm.
because I mean, The analysis you guys didn't come back and say it was in great shape.
No.
So it
Was
does
you
seem
here
to
last
be-
week?
Yeah, I say the buckets that I saw last week.
It does seem to be a known problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, include it and reference it.
I guess, just, and I don't want to belabor the point, so this doesn't need a response, but it was really helpful, Christine, to hear your comment about that, and thank you for doing the work. And net zero piece, my only question is, do we need to have an environmental consultant that would be different than what would be in a typical project, or kind of your I don't mean garden variety, it's a bad analogy, I don't mean that's pejorative, but just the standard environmental consultant who would work on any project would be sufficient, or would we need a different level of analysis? I'm not knowledgeable enough to know the answer. That's what I was asking.
Go ahead.
I would suggest that a commercial grade, front-of-the-mill environmentalist would be sufficient, given we have the asbestos studies of the school, we have the environmental study of the indoor air quality issues, and we have the roof issues known, all that can be attached. I would think that would be sufficient.
So I just want to make sure we're on the same page, because we had a lot of discussion in the RFQ working group about what kind of certification and, you know, and I mean, so I want to make sure we're talking about, because environmental kind of gets kind of thrown around broadly. So we talked about that, and we didn't really come to a resolution, but we need some input. So
Yeah.
Christine, do you mind
Sure.
talking about that?
No, we can definitely. So I think what Maria is pointing to more right now is the level of experience of the architect and the design team, and their experience with LEED or with CHIPS or with 2030 Building Challenge or any of the other associated, you know, criteria-based building programs that we might want to be reviewing and investing in. But that would be separate from, you know, this sort of very quantitative analytical approach of testing the existing conditions in the built environment. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I guess I think we wanted feedback from the committee about
Which programs were seemed important.
Yeah, how do we
So-
want to phrase that in the RFQ?
Right, so according, the MSBA says either or on CHIPS or LEED. I don't think we have a strong preference either way. So I think we will bring that to the committee to debate, and since it's not actually being pushed all the way through, you know, we're sunsetting at the ends of feasibility. I don't think it needs to be a black or white either or, since we're not actually, you know, we'll be making a recommendation, we won't actually be chasing.
So there's like two things I see here that, as far as the RFQ, as far as this, you know, green certification. I mean, I prefer to use that term rather than environmental, because it just
Because it
helps
complicates the
separates it.
existing molds.
So we're talking about, yeah, the environmental analysis is different than green certification in whatever form that takes. We certainly want to hire somebody with a lot of experience in this regard, net zero. But also, I think we need to be clear in the RFQ, and people have, you know, my impression is that we would like to make sure that they're prepared to do this analysis when they're looking at their fee, and we're actually hiring them to give us sort of, when we're asking them to do a budget or a cost analysis of proposed plans. I think we also need to understand the green credentials, potential green credentials of different options. So when we ask them to do a cost analysis, I think we also need to ask them to do a green building analysis. And as far as CHIPS or LEED, I would even suggest that it was something we could ask the design team to help us choose what the most appropriate certification would be, because I'd love to hear from them what that could be.
Good comment.
Do we think that gives us enough to draft it?
Yeah. Support. Progress, we say. Other part one?
I have
comments?
one more.
Yep.
I don't know if we need to clarify at the end of the project objectives. It says new construction will consider Taos net zero energy vital. Is new building an addition? Should we clarify or? It has to be, it's new construction is general, but I think it would be best to put new buildings and additions, because that's the net zero
Yeah, we
bylaw.
went back and forth on this language a little bit, I think.
Later on the text
Yeah.
it says new building and additions, but in this phrase it says only new construction.
Because they are both subject to the
Yeah.
Yeah.
But renovation is not subject to net zero.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, other comments? Section 1.
Basic services, where's that at? Basic services.
There we go, yes.
So it talks about in basic services, like, construction documents, bidding and administration of the construction contract.
That's, yeah.
That's all, okay.
Yeah,
Needs to
that
get out of
scope's
there.
wrong.
Okay.
Where exactly is it?
Very,
Bottom of page.
It's actually right here, it's on the top of the
okay.
extended.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not,
And like lighting
I'm not with
design.
you. Where are we?
and I'm assuming things like
It was on
daylighting
page, I think,
analysis.
unfortunately.
3, 4, 5, top of page 5, I think.
Yeah.
Including the cover sheet. Right above local bylaws, that big paragraph above.
And then as far as what we kind of replace that language with, I'm wondering if like, you know, the MSBA, I don't know enough about the MSBA, but I'm assuming they provide sort of in their contractual language, what the work product they're looking for at the end of schematic design. And I'm wondering if we could steal some of their language or refer to MSBA. So like the end of a feasibility phase, what do they expect to
What's its
see?
expectation? Yeah.
You know, a book that has, you know, this in it, like what is the actual work product? Because we're not asking for construction contract documents, we're asking for a reference book that we can write.
This language is stolen verbatim from the MSBA.
So, is there a subset though that they look at just for at the end of the feasibility phase?
Not for their purposes, because in the MSBA process, your designer is going to continue on into
Right.
we will probably have to come up with some language there. I think you're right that
Yeah.
we need it.
Because the New York State higher education is one I'm most familiar with, certainly had like, the end of feasibility study, we wanted to see a document that had
I would,
in it.
New York State
Yeah.
higher education.
Yeah, nice seg. No, it's electric company. I'll tell you later. But like in the, you know, they talk about in the modules from the MSBA process, the, you know, a preliminary design program and preferred schematic report. And so if that's what they're describing, I'm assuming they tell us more what a preferred schematic report is.
I will look.
So they would be very different things. Preferred schematic report is at the end of a, way further into the process and what we're gonna be. This is more in line with preliminary design
program.
alternatives,
Yeah.
right? Because they're going to be giving us different, you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this. Schematics, that's
A preferred schematic report though is not the schematic design. So they're talking about, so in this module
yeah,
that
that's,
they talked about is, well,
Yeah.
yeah, no, yeah.
That's
We're
when
not
you- yeah.
schematic design.
yeah, but it's after you've decided that this is
The
what
one
we-
you're gonna
Chosen
pursue.
an option.
This
right.
is the option.
Yeah.
And then it's gotten into way digging deeper. So we kind of want preliminary design alternatives, if to be analogous.
And so we probably do have to, or potentially we have to create some language of our own to set the standard. We want to, for example, we want to see a new building, a renovation, an addition.
That's
sort of.
actually in,
Right.
that's the module. There's a,
Okay.
yeah, there's a point,
Where they
it's
have to
in the
look at that.
PDP
Okay.
of the MSBA. I can send that along.
Okay. Other comments on part 1? Moving on to part 2.
I'll suggest that, so with part 2, the proposal submission terms and requirements are all boilerplate from the town's contract. I'll suggest that the additional submission instructions will probably change to reflect what you guys decide is needed later, so I wouldn't I wouldn't want to spend too much time here, because that's probably going to change based on what you guys highlight as being important. But
I wanted to bring closure to the previous topic we just
Okay.
had, briefly. So when I look through here, I can see laced through the first section, the components of what we're assuming the final deliverables are going to look like. I mean, so in the last paragraph of the background information page that says Part 1, it describes the design work to include renovation, addition, and demolition, not including to, and then it even puts in sort of budgetary ranges of any fiscal considerations the town has. It continues on to describe all this information here that similarly, I think, describe components that one would see in a final report. And then the summary, in terms of basic services, presumably would include some description of a final report with attachments including blah, 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 including presentations, public presentation-ready materials or something like that. And if we assume they wanted to make them a presentation, they could make a presentation. Wouldn't that be right?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Am I talking gibberish?
It sounds like, though, we need to kind of corral it into a single piece of this.
No, but that's the point.
Okay.
It's calling out as sort of a summary that as you go through these services, we're then expecting them to pull this information together and hand it to us in a document, whatever spreadsheets or follow-on documents, and then presentation.
So as you were saying, Anthony, there's sections of Part 2 that'll are boilerplate and parts that will be edited to reflect other edits.
so the additional submission instructions, we will change. Some of that is boilerplate, some of that is boilerplate based on Chapter 7C, and some of it will just be changed or reformatted based on things you guys decide to include. And then fee proposal is boilerplate. So, I don't think we need to spend too much time on Part 2.
Does anyone have particular comments or questions? 3. No qualifications. Other items.
Part 3 is still fairly messy, but was a lot messier before, if you recall. I tried to reorganize it into better sections and to make it flow a little better. So it opens up with minimum qualifications, some of which are not up for debate, and you could add others. And it then goes into selection process, which I tried to clean up a bit. That's still something this committee will need to decide on as to who is doing it. And then evaluation criteria is where I want the most feedback, because what I've thrown out here, and it's not terribly organized either, is things that we might consider evaluating our submissions on. Some of them have some ideas about what might be highly advantageous, not, and unacceptable. Some of them don't. But this is where I want the most feedback.
So general question about our process. Do we have a team that is going to make the judgment based on the submittal? Or are we looking for a nuts and bolts descriptor? We've done this thing and we like this thing and we're capable of the other thing, that we kind of check through and score. They create different evaluation forms. What's our intent?
I think we got that quite that far.
We haven't got that far. We are under law given broad discretion here.
Okay.
We can set up a very strict scorecard. Those highly advantageous, and not things are. Those are how these proposals have to be evaluated under 30B, but under 7C we are not required to do that. It could be by free form. What's important is that we set rules and follow them.
So may I suggest 5 or 6 categories: professional experience, years in this field, qualifications of the staff, the standard stuff. And then we apply, I'm going to use the word professional judgment to evaluate. So we use the same criteria. We have determined what it is that we're looking for. If you get too far into the weeds with, we want to know how many brown buildings you've designed with south-facing facades, we kind of undermine ourselves. Suggestion?
I'm confused.
Rather than being highly specific about the criteria that we're going to use, we give them broad categories. The firm applies based on those broad categories, and we evaluate them in a broad manner for our purposes.
So you're saying that this list that we've got that runs from A down to P is a bit too detailed?
I would say it is substantively too detailed to grade, but it is inclusive of what you want to think about. So have the broader categories, and these are the things that we've discussed, that we've developed, that we want this product to be.
So if I understand what you want to say is the criteria that goes out is more broader, and this would be kind of the rubric that the selection committee would have in the background to choose, to take into account.
So I'm a little hesitant to call it a rubric.
But,
I understand, but the contracting officer, procurement officer will need to be fair to all the bidders. Therefore, they need to know what they're being graded upon. So whatever is published is what we use. But yes, we have thought about these things, and these are the things that are important to us on a professional level. Suggestion?
Could you give an example of like the 5 or so, those broad
Sure.
things?
Professional experience. How many years have you done this? How many years have you done this kind of work? Qualification of the individual specifically associated with the contract. Past performance. If we're considering specifically in reading from your playbook, if we're considering specifically past performance on cost estimating, then we want to focus on that. If we're focusing on specifically green certifications, past performances, we focus on that. Location, how far away are they? Because we don't want to burn up a boatload of money and travel back and forth. And any other criteria that we find specific to what it is that we're after.
So it's being more of a lumper than a splitter for these?
I would say yes.
Okay.
It gives us the latitude to evaluate based on our vision of what it is that we want to have happen.
It's a non sequitur, but I have to walk out in a minute, so I'm sorry, Jim. Just 2 things I noticed in section 3. One was just, it has loose language about there may be interviews. My personal opinion is if there's going to be interviews that are public, places should know that up front, because that's something they should weigh in their planning. And I'm not saying there should or shouldn't be interviews, but I think the loose language, for me, I have some thoughts on it. The second piece is just the minority and women-owned businesses. There was no sort of references. You have to list how much, and I didn't know if this group wanted to set a specific percentage as a minimum threshold. In the MSBA projects, there is a minimum threshold. I'm not suggesting there needs to be, but I just think it's worthy of discussion that obviously I won't have because I have to leave, but I just want, not that it necessarily needs to be. And I can't remember the MSBA percentage. It probably could pick it up. It's like, my recollection is 17 or 18%. Does that sound? Yeah, it's in that neighborhood. So just something to consider, that there's language in section 3 that references it a priority, but there's not a minimum threshold, and whether the group believes one way or the other on that question. It's something I thought would be worthy of discussion. Again, what we found in MSBA, I'll share my opinion on it before I leave, is that because there's a minimum threshold set, you can still weigh it, but at least you're not weighing it in a vacuum of like, well, some places 4, some places 2. Right? It's how much above a minimum threshold, instead of it's sending a clear message to firms that we're consulting. And all the firms that we got a lot of applicants met the threshold, so I don't think it prevented applicants. So my non-vote would be that it would be a positive thing to put in there. Sorry.
Yeah, and actually, I'm probably wrong about this, but as I'm reading through here, I'd slightly disagree with you.
Yeah.
Because actually this language carried over from the draft I was reading, unfortunately, earlier, that there isn't actually any preference put in for women and minority-owned businesses. There's simply a requirement that you specify whether you have any on your team, and that they essentially not be given busy, I'm translating, they not be given busy work, but they be given core component work of the project. So if we actually want it to be a priority, we're actually going to specifically call it out, as well as having language in here describing, you know, the kind of work that they get.
So the percentage, you were right there, 17.9%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Not usually that good, so thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I think you also, just to follow on something, I think you answered a question I had when I was reading previously, that the minimum qualifications stated a requirement for some experience with green building or net zero building, but then in the evaluation criteria, there's no reference to them presenting any experience with net zero or I don't know, however you want to phrase it in terms of green building. And I was actually going to ask the question today about whether, if it's in minimum qualifications, does that mean it's automatically considered as part of the selection criteria? Or do we need to call it out in both places to make sure that it's really understood that we need that expertise?
If it's in minimum qualifications, then you do not need to have it again in comparative unless it's in kind of an additional. If there's a minimum qualification that you have done 5 net zero energy projects in the past, if they don't meet it, then they can't be considered. They stop there and they don't even progress to comparative evaluations.
Right.
So it might be in both places if you want to have a minimum and then also a comparative scale where people who have done more get more points and people who have done less get less points, but everyone's done some. So that's an option.
I'm going to ask the builders and designers and project managers here, the table, the question. What I would want to make sure is that we had someone or team that had experience actually building a net zero or a highly green award-winning building, and not simply working on projects in which that, like, I don't want their quals to be, hey, look, here's a building that was never built, that, or a series of things where we did alternatives that included green, but nothing was ever built. To me, it's a whole order of magnitude difference of experience if somebody went through the entire process and had to actually build something that either had a high level of certification or was net zero, and had to live through whatever pain points they had to go through to actually execute it. Like, that's what I would want, is somebody to say, no, I've done this, and let me tell you, either it's feasible for these reasons, or oh my God, are you biting off a huge amount to chew, but here's why and what it is. Make sense?
Yes. Yeah, so it sounds like we may need to do a little bit more refining here. It's going to be easy for people to demonstrate that they've done LEED buildings. It's going to be a little bit harder, I think, for people to demonstrate completed projects that are net zero. There are some out there, but that's going to be the slightly higher standard. I don't know if we want to leave ourselves a little bit more flexibility towards that.
Well, maybe not net zero
Right.
specifically, but I don't know what quantum you want to give them to say,
Right,
okay,
as the minimum.
show us a completed
Right.
project that was green to this extent.
So if you say we to some extent, shall we put a minimum standard that this has to be LEED gold, so that, or whichever we decide that is closer to the net zero, although the LEED is different certification, and a silver is very different from a gold or higher, so.
So I would suggest that we as future owners inflict substantive pain on the designers in not getting things built for a variety of the reasons unrelated to the design. And are we going to be far enough in the process, do we think, to make will it matter if it's LEED silver or LEED gold? Or
Well, I think what our process as a
Sure.
group will not lead to a building.
Exactly.
And so, in a sense, I understand what you're saying from that perspective. At the same time, we want to know that the designer that we select has enough experience actually doing it, as Eric was saying, that they can say, go down this path, don't go down this path, or go down this path with caution. You know,
Right.
so sort of help us get to what's feasible and what's not.
Okay, so, I'm
I
sorry.
think part of it too is that at the end of the day in our feasibility study, we want a series of options and we want pretty well delineated cost proposals that go with them. And so in order for those cost estimates to be developed, we need, narratives from all of the associated design consultants explaining, what our rating of the walls and the windows and the building envelope and, what the anticipated energy consumption of the mechanicals are and, all of how those mechanicals are made up so that we can get cost proposals on them. So I think having, as Eric mentioned, somebody who's done that work and succeeded at doing that work, being able to inform the decision-making that goes into the descriptor of the narrative will give us, a better end result.
So, just taking the next step, this is 10% of the evaluation score, it's 20, 30, 50, 90. This is the kind of conversation we're gonna have over each factor.
Yeah, I think part of it too, and maybe we don't have closure from the town yet, is I think we're waiting to hear how that selection committee will be appointed.
Okay.
And we don't know if it's who's on it, how it's being chosen.
What we do know is that we don't get to just choose it. We may get to choose it and then get it approved by the town manager, correct?
So the impression I have had, and I have not had this final discussion with the town manager, is that the committee will nominate basically who they want to be on the selection committee, and the town manager will sign off on it. I want to have that conversation with him this week about what it'll actually look like, but I don't think he's interested in commandeering this in that way. The selection committee can be a subset of this committee. It could be the committee in full. It's up to you.
So, to go back to Jim's, I hear what you're saying, that's great, so we'll follow up, I guess, on how we do that. Is the RFQ working group gonna meet again?
Yeah.
I don't know, unless people wanna argue it out, I'm perfectly happy to punt that working group, figuring out how to score and rank the criteria. To me, my point was simply, I think it's too much of an issue in this town, and it's too serious that we've got to have that criteria, as we discussed it, as we're just discussing it around green buildings and green qualifications and net zero, in the evaluation criteria. Because if it's not there, then I think it's too likely to drop out. And not to beat a dead horse on this, but we're already, I'm saying this on camera, which is really polite of me. We already have a lot of people in town who are incredibly well-intentioned, either experts or self-educated on what we need to do around green building. If we're going to bother doing this and have something that's worth sharing with the town, we need to have people who have even greater expertise than we do on the topic. So like they need to have gone through some high, and I'm not sure, I get your point that we may not want to constrain ourselves to say they must have built a net zero elementary school or something, but getting as close to that as possible so that they can really give us experienced feedback on the options, I think is really important.
So, just following in that same train of thought, we are not remotely adequately funded to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not even going to get out of the block.
Yeah, that, basically what we're looking at, that $150,000, I think Wildwood was at like $220 for their feasibility study, not including the 2 additional ad services.
Right.
So we're pretty far behind, but I think that there's some, maybe I'm a little heavy in some of those line items. But I think we can also maybe look at a shorter time frame for deliverables, which puts pressure on the committee for community outreach and engagement and public transparency in the process. But I think shortening that would be good, would be helpful in bringing down the fee.
And not to cut off the debate, but at this point I must step away.
Thank you for coming.
So,
I have one pedestrian comment, it's a very specific comment on this section. Item J says quality of presentation to the town. I didn't see any other places. All the submittals are going to be making presentations, or is it the submittal of the document?
So all of the initial bidders will submit only paper presentations to the town. The evaluators will then narrow down a list of at least 3 finalists, at which point they may call for interviews, or may just submit a ranked list of finalists to the town manager. That quality of presentation was kind of just inserted to remind people that we can consider that, or find a way to phrase how we want to consider that.
Yeah.
You're just looking thoughtful.
I'm just looking.
Yeah, I think it might have to be rephrased because it's not there on the items that they have to submit, and it's included a presentation, it's only a May, so it's,
As you'd like to, however you'd like to phrase it.
the question is, do we need to clarify whether they have a nicer slice on that one or the other? I think I work more on the content than on the presentation.
Yeah, I think in this case, it's more in regard to the presentation of an interview, right?
That was my I was thinking.
That's, I think, how we were thinking about it. And I personally would be strongly recommending that we interview whoever the finalists are in order to make a choice. But I think that was part of what we wanted to discuss with the group,
So
preference for interviewer.
why don't we focus on that, because then we logically can resolve the question of whether we need to reconcile language to inserting something about interviews and presentations earlier, or strike it. That we can figure that answer easily in terms of the language once we determine whether we're doing an interview. What do people think?
I would say interview, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Does anyone have a contrary opinion they'd like to share in the spirit of collaboration? You do?
I'm safe for interview, but maybe do we want to say in person or remote? I don't know if people are open to lower the cost in setting up a video conferencing. I know it's not the same, but for cost issues we might.
So under Massachusetts law, do we pay for their pre-proposal costs?
Okay, so then,
They should come here.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was, if we had to pay, I was,
Yeah.
Okay, so we want them to come, and we definitely want to do interviews, which means probably the quality of their presentation or interview can now remain,
Yeah.
however modified, it can remain in that language. Are there other things, and sorry to jump in on what you were doing earlier. Are there other feedback on section 3 or part 3? Does the working group feel like it has the feedback it needs from the whole committee at this point, or are there other things you want to clarify? As you might. Things you want to.
And this is a good time for other people to tell us if they've got anything, because we can't contact you after this.
Absolutely.
So that, I have a
Yes.
question on that point. Is it not allowed under open meeting law for me to receive feedback from individuals directly? I'm not even a voting member.
You can receive feedback on the text directly. It's interesting. I think if you found clerical things to change, like we didn't mean to say this on page 37 and you're covering it over to page 38, then that's carrying over language. That's okay. If you're actually suggesting edits, the rule should be no, because the rule is anything that becomes too substantive. Like, for example, it still says January 17th on here as a bidders conference. We're obviously not doing a bidders conference at January 17th. So somebody telling you, hey, you need to correct the language of the bidders conference is probably okay. Saying, I don't think we should have a bidders conference, that should come up in open meeting. Yes.
Again, completely ignorant of this process, is it acceptable if I comment to Anthony that my comments be incorporated into the meeting minutes documentation?
Well, I mean, let me backtrack on that, because it's actually, is that, this is the problem between the method of how you proceed versus how things naturally proceed in groups of people. If you and Maria, for example, reach out to Anthony separately and independently of each other and look through the document and say, hey, I noticed this thing on page 3, it needs to be changed, that's actually not a violation of open meeting law. If as a method, we actually encourage the entire committee to start sending in edits, including substantive edits outside of the meeting, then that crosses lines, because what you're essentially doing is you're allowing deliberation to happen outside of the public, and because then, you know, you're getting everyone's views, and then you're sort of saying, oh, I can reconcile all this, and then magically a new document appears and no one knows why or how it happened.
And it's important, it's not only that, you know, of 11 people, 6 of them gather, it's if it's happened serially.
Understood.
That's
So-
exactly the point. So
Right.
the weird thing about this is, if separately, I'm not trying to pick on you, if separately the two of you happen to send in comments, that's not a violation of anything, it's not a big deal. But the problem is, that's why you've got anything that smells like a method of getting around, having to call a meeting, your little spidey sense should go up saying, oh my goodness, we shouldn't do that, that's a mistake.
So speak now.
Yeah, and we've just given lots of filibustering time for you to do so.
I have a couple of comments I wanted to ask. When the evaluation criteria lists all the architect, environmental permitting, hazardous materials, civil engineering, do we need to keep all that list, or can it be streamlined? Do we need to include the landscape architecture, cost estimating? You were saying, do we need?
We should have two. They should have
What
theirs,
is
and we
it?
should have ours,
Okay.
and we should reconcile. We did keep this list very broad in the document, mostly so that we could have this discussion about what we needed. Some of the ones that I think might be up for debate would be like the food and cafeteria consultant, if that's even still on here.
No, it's not.
Or the acoustical consultant. I mean, I think we all know that an acoustician would be needed in a full-on project, so that, but is it needed actually at the feasibility stage?
That's my point. Since we are with a limited budget and limited amount of time, the more we ask, the longer the process will be and the more expensive the process is. So if we don't ask, we won't get it. But at this point, yeah.
And are we interested in product? Sorry. And are we interested in product versus who they use to get there?
I will point out that this section, unless I missed something, is not pointing out who they have to have, but if they have them, they need to list them. So this is not a list of mandatory consultants they must employ, but if you are employing them, we want to know who they are.
At the same time, by giving a list, you imply that you might want to see this.
Very much so.
So they might have in-house and said, oh, they list, so I put it in the list. So I don't know where is the fine line, whether we decide at this point to strike down some of these or not.
Yes.
So I think the RFQ task force will definitely want to meet again. I know that we had talked about having the 1 hour meeting. I was surprised that it was getting scheduled so soon, because I thought we had intended the 1 hour meeting to be like focused on the RFQ, but I don't know if that's, does it make sense to have it next, 1 hour meeting about the RFQ next week?
Well, I think if we need to turn around some of this feedback and then send it back out, then that meeting needs to be a little bit further for people to have time to review.
Okay.
So can you, let's talk about that now. Well, actually, hold on a second. Let's do this serially and quickly. Is there any other feedback on part 3 or on the document itself?
We never came back around to the comprised of question, did we?
No.
Comprised of?
Yes,
All the different
each proposal shall be reviewed by selection board comprised of.
I'll point out that half of your voting members are missing right now.
We still have quorum, don't we?
Yeah.
You do.
Sorry, I was just looking around like,
very
wait a minute.
very nearly have like, you may, and 3 of them haven't even been sworn in yet.
Hmm.
It might, feels a little weird to make that decision, but that's up to you guys.
Forgive me, didn't you say, were you looking for additional feedback from the town manager, or were you offering to us that we're supposed to come up with our own idea and then see it
That's what I heard.
validated by the town manager?
I was offering
Unless we're
that- I was
being
on-
unreasonable.
I was offering that, not saying that that decision needs to be made today.
So
but-
that's got to be on a future agenda. That can't
Yeah.
be. We're not going to decide that right now. Certainly, with people absent, it doesn't make any sense. So is there anything else in terms of the text? seeing none, then you guys are the working group. You tell us, how long do you want to meet, turn around a document, and get us back so that we can have Debbie send out another doodle poll for another date really soon, or for a meeting? You know what I mean? Like, if it's not next week, then when is it?
I mean, I wasn't saying we couldn't do next week, I was mostly curious. I mean, we'll probably have a snow day tomorrow. We can get a lot of work done tomorrow, and it's probably via Google Docs if we can't meet in person, so.
I like your optimism.
We can ask Debbie to choose the date later in the week. There were several, I think she sent
4
poll
days.
for 4 days, I think Monday through Thursday.
Of next week.
Of next week, the poll included the 4 days. Maybe try to get quorum on the later days of the week.
Can I propose that we shoot for it, and if we can't manage to get the 4 of us together and get something, we can, we'll advise the chair, who is on the committee, so.
Chair will advise him or herself.
You do have a snow day for working tomorrow.
We won't know that, we won't know that until 6 though.
No, we know
No.
that.
No, we won't know that.
No.
Oh, has it been declared?
No.
We won't
apparently
know
not.
that until 6.
Apparently not.
Okay. That's very mysterious of you. Okay. So hold on, let me just get clarity on this, because if I don't know this, then maybe someone else does. What are we doing? We're going to try to go for one of the meetings on that doodle poll?
Yeah, and
Okay.
then if the RFQ working group for some reason cannot get together and produce a new draft, by then we will advise the chair, who will advise the committee that forget
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Can
Cool.
I make the suggestion that we meet anyhow, since there are other topics like filling up the vacancies that needs to be done? So I would still keep the meeting, push to keep the meeting, either it's the RFQ or filling up the empty
Yeah.
slots.
My only concern would be over notification, public notification, and how soon it gets that and how soon that has to go out.
Hmm.
So-
2 days.
48 hours notice.
I know, but.
So essentially, if there's a Monday meeting, it has to be out by Friday.
And it doesn't include weekends.
Thursday.
Oh, it does?
That's
Okay.
Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday.
So if we push, we try to come up with a meeting at the end of the week, because we need to fill the vacancies in order to decide how many members are gonna be on the committee. So we need to move forward on these items as well, so we want to have as many members as possible. So I would say either we discuss RFQ or we discuss membership.
That's true. I mean, I guess what I don't really understand about what the superintendent was saying earlier, when he was saying he met with the town manager, if the town manager is appointing someone else from town hall to be on the committee, I don't know what they need to discuss, and I don't know how that has any bearing on what the school committee decides. I mean, we need somebody from town hall, ideally somebody with some financial experience. Either you can find whoever that person is, or is having trouble finding that person. The committee is going to have to resolve on, the school committee, have to resolve on presumably Wednesday night, if it really wants to interject itself into appointing school staff or educators to the committee, or leave it to us. But we only have one person applying right now. We've got to figure out the other person. So I mean, I'm saying that only because mechanically, even though we can meet to discuss it, a lot of the actual execution of getting those additional members on either is outside of our control or is fairly straightforward. I mean, we simply take someone because they're applying, or we don't, and figure out what the criteria is. But I mean, we meet. Go on. So we're going to do that. Are we agreed to do that? Meaning we'll try to get something early next week.
Yes.
Scheduled back week. Okay, great. Is there anything else on? There's something called Look and Discuss RFQ Draft. And underneath that, there was something about Sean Mangano. Is that something what you discussed earlier?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
So
cool.
we had the invoices. I did a quick little sketch of how we might spend our money or the town's money.
Shouldn't that have been called Christine's homework then? I mean, it was like her excellent work or something. And here Sean's getting all the credit on the agenda. So timeline, is there anything else on timeline around what our current timeline is to try to get this done?
Right, so I didn't put together like a milestone projected, although once we have an estimated fee, we're gonna break that out by person hours to see how much we might be spending per month of that fee, which I think is probably around $20,000 a month.
Was that's for spending once we've hired somebody, but
Yes.
was this
But this
timeline
needs to be overall
Oh, yeah, I thought this timeline was like,
committee.
when are we gonna form the committee to hire them?
Oh.
Or is, maybe I'm wrong.
I would like to see an overall timeline for our committee of, milestones
That would
of,
be great.
like, when we should be, advertising, hiring, going through the process, engaging the public, like, an overall timeline, which comprises many smaller ones.
Yeah.
It would be more detailed than any of us have available to us right now.
I thought this was something that had to go into the RFQ document. That's the timeline I thought it was, but I'm probably wrong.
If we have work phases or a project timeline, it would make sense to include it.
Mhm.
I think that would be beneficial.
Is there something we have from the Wildwood project that could help us outline that as well?
We haven't asked for it, I'm not sure if it's available.
It, wouldn't there be sort of a fork in the, presumably if you want something quick, you're either asking for something light in terms of the content, or it's gonna be more expensive if it's detailed. If you trade it off.
You can
and
have it good, you can have it fast, or you can have it cheap, pick any two. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, exactly. And so, but I mean, it does seem like thank you. It does seem you'd want to give some kind of guidance, even if just global guidance, like we're looking to get this thing done by X,
Yeah.
right? Certainly an end date.
Yeah.
Even if we're asking them to come up with a schedule,
Yeah, I
we
think
have to have
it's a
some kind of end date to it.
Very good thing to have.
Is
Okay.
there input from the committee on so that we could include that in our next draft? Right, that's what we want to know.
Mhm.
Um,
We're looking at 3 or 4 months round trip, aren't we, for the performance period?
I think it's, maybe 6.
Okay. We're gonna have, I'm sorry.
No, I was
No,
just
I was
trying to.
saying, if I was looking at the cost, if we said we had only available 150,000, maybe, and we said it was $30,000, that gives us 5 months only for the timeline. If the cost is per month about $30,000, then it's 5 months.
That was the burn rate at Wildwood,
Yeah.
$30,000 a month. I don't think we might be as fast in spending the money. Maybe if
Okay.
we were looking at $20,000 a month, then that's more like a 6-month time frame.
Okay.
Which I think is probably more reasonable for the amount of work that we want to do, like a traffic consultant and any larger site work analysis, along with information that we want to gather that we can't even start testing for until 6 months from now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you feel like you have the guidance you need on that? I mean, it seems like we've backed into a timeline.
At least
Rough
for,
timeline.
we'll come up with something and then know that we'll present something and be ready to tell us that you disagree or agree. How's that?
Okay, sounds good. Is there anything else on the RFQ draft before we move on to feedback on website? Seeing none, feedback on website.
I couldn't find tonight's agenda.
What?
I could not find tonight's agenda.
Because I didn't get it on time. I need a PDF on time, so there was an agenda, I think I discussed it with Sheldon. There was an agenda posted on the town website, but it was an old agenda.
Oh, right.
That, I think. But in order to post it in time, I need to receive it on time. I cannot do instantaneous posting. The website is not the most user friendly, so I need a couple of days.
Not in general. I'm wondering if instead of sending attachments of things, that we really start using this website as our go-to spot. So if we send an email out with an agenda, instead of attaching that agenda, we make it a practice of sending a link to the agenda that's on the website. It will be a way to enforce us to make sure that the website is being used frequently and timely. So I don't know the mechanism by which the chair would have to work with the web designer, if we give the chair permission to be able to do that work on the website directly.
It has to be uploaded. So far, I think Claire and I had access to the website, so now it's me.
Yeah.
Is the agenda posted 48 hours in advance? That's part of the public notification?
In the town website, yes. In our subcommittee, not always. I only now got from Nicole all past documents today. So.
Sure. So I'm just wondering, along Heather's line, if it's automatically being done at the town level when it's posted 48 hours in advance, then maybe that person could also be posting to the committee website at the same time.
I don't know how they do it. I know that Debbie sends an email with the agenda to the town. I don't know which channels it goes.
I have a thought, why don't we just have Debbie send it to the town and you at the same time?
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Or the chair has access to post,
Yes.
because if the chair is sending it to Debbie,
That's true. I was just trying to figure out a solution we could do right this second that would actually solve the problem.
Right.
In the long
we
term.
still need Debbie until we have a formal chair.
So yes, so because the access to somebody has to be through town, the town has to give access to this person. It's not
If
like
Debbie
I'm-
has to be the one to post to the school, then why don't we just have Debbie post it everywhere? If that's what you're saying.
I'm
Does she have
reluctant to
access to
give
the
Debbie
website?
additional jobs to do without the
No,
superintendent.
I was actually saying something really simple. If Debbie is sending the PDF to the town to post on the website, if she just CC'd Irina at the same time,
And
then you could,
actually the
then you could
committee.
post it on the website.
Actually, to the committee, the whole committee.
I'm okay with that too. I mean, I just,
As long as it
Who
ain't.
gets it?
I'm just saying as long as you're
Yeah.
included on that list of
Yeah.
people it goes
Got
to.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Or is the current agenda always posted to the same URL on the city town website? Because then you could just have a link from our webpage to the town webpage.
No, it's not so simple. As far as I know, it's not so simple. Each committee has a different repository. I can only have managed the Fall River. I see the list of other things. I cannot access anything else. So everything's compartmented. I only have authorization to go into the archives of our committee.
Can I really urge you just to let me have Debbie send the email to you as well as also the town?
Okay.
And then we can figure out this question of whether
Mhm.
it goes to everyone on the committee and all that kind of stuff later.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, we can solve this issue really
Okay.
easily if you putting it on the website, if Debbie sends it to you at the same time she does it to the town.
Okay.
And I'm sure she'll do that happily, and it won't burden her, obviously. Great. Any other feedback on the website?
Yeah, so to start be able to flesh out things like the working documents other part, I'm wondering if it makes most sense because I really love that like the RFQ draft was attached to the meeting minutes and that'll get posted in the meeting minutes. If in the working documents you can just have a link back to the meeting minutes, you can say RFQ draft, of this date, and then it just links back to the meeting minutes rather than repeating that. Having to separate out that document.
I was hesitant to post anything that has not been approved by the committee. So on the working documents, only the minutes is there, but anything that we haven't approved, I would not post before we approve. So for example, the draft that we got today, I think that's my idea, was not to post it before because it hasn't been approved.
Well, like Eric was obviously looking for the draft for the RFQ today, he couldn't find it, right? So I really would love the website to be a place where this committee can really use, so instead of sending around emails with a draft, I would love that the website would have the most current draft, and then when we send out an email, hey everybody, look, I have the latest draft is on the website, it's clearly marked as a draft, it will be discussed at the next meeting. But I'd really love to get away from sending emails out to people and sending links to the website so that all of us can look at that website. Any member of the public can look at that website, draft or not, it's clearly marked as a draft. But, people are concerned about process and that, how we get from A to B, you can look through all the drafts and see how we get there. It's a matter of just keeping our information organized. It's there already, we're not withholding anything, but now we're organizing in a way that we can all use it and find it when we want it.
I also think it's really wise for us to post our drafts for that public comment piece. So if we want input from the community, and making sure that our drafts are public as well is important.
We could take a vote on this, but I just know people have a sentiment on this question.
So, if you're talking about posting, the draft of the minutes that had the draft of the RFQ attached, is that? So,
March. I think she's mentioning, for example, the draft that we got to discuss today.
Right, that's what I was.
the document,
Both.
I think it's fine to put, I would argue for an and, not an or. I would say, fine to put it onto the website, but I think putting it, sending it by email is also, I would like to have it by email too, rather than a link. So you could do both.
I would like to have both because sometimes I cannot send an email, upload immediately.
Well,
To
I
the
mean, do we
website.
need a helper then for you on the website?
Probably Claire was the second one, so I was without network for today, so I couldn't have posted something for today. So yeah.
When the website was first decided to be on Civic Plus, I made the offer to be a backup. I'm in that system already.
Okay.
I don't know who has to make the request to get the access.
So we have a couple of different items on the table. I mean, one is posting meeting materials both in advance and I guess as a repository after the meetings of what we're discussing in the meetings, which includes RFQs and any other materials, PowerPoints, whatever we're going to get. That's one issue. There was a sentiment that people, so that's one thing. The second thing is, do we communicate with members of the committee solely through the website or through the website in a combination of emails? And then the third question is, who backs you up on doing the website? If we take these things in reverse, if you guys can figure this out, then it sounds like we have a solution to the question of who can back you up on posting things. Why don't we take these items separately? We said there seemed to be a rising sentiment that people would like to get both things posted on the website and emails. Is that the sentiment? Okay, so we're going to continue doing that, but we're going to try to put more things on. Then the third point was, do we want to have more things put up on the website so when people are looking at upcoming meetings or past meetings, they can see drafts of items up there and be able to, they'll know to come and talk to us because they saw the draft or something. And I think the only thing is, what do people think of that?
Agreed.
I agree. I would suggest if people can, whenever creating the documents, if they can put PDF with a watermark that says draft on the background. So that whatever is posted, it has a watermark that says draft. So then it's very clear.
The only other thing I would probably say we should probably say as a rule is that if there's some reason why somebody's preparing something for the meeting and just through time and attention they wanted to get it to people a few days ahead of time and they're not able to and they have to present it at the meeting, that we don't, you know what I'm saying, if it's on the agenda and it's appropriately posted on the agenda, the fact that somebody wasn't able to get the PowerPoint to you early enough to post on the website hopefully shouldn't be a barrier to us discussing it at the meeting if in fact it's on the agenda and we say it's going to be presented at the meeting.
I think if we're going to have many things on the website that are drafts or have been issued or maybe have been revised after they've been issued, we need a really clear, consistent naming system so that they fall in line the way that they came out, and so that there's no question about which one is the current one. I have a suggestion to do that. But it's pretty easy where you take like today's date, 18/03/09, and then it would be RFQ and then draft. And then the date for each draft would change. And then once that RFQ got issued, it would be the date of the issue with RFQ and then issued. And then if anything changed, not that the RFQ would change after it was issued, but some document will be changed after it's issued, then it would be appended by Rev 1, Rev 2, Rev 3, so for revisions.
And I'm fond of superseded for those that are. Yep, I'm right there with you.
I've been trying so far the minutes keep that standard and the agenda keep the dates.
Yeah.
Okay, any other feedback on the web? Yes.
On the member list, if we could include people's roles as well as their names, so that we can clearly show where the vacancies are at the moment. And then for people who, like Nicole, who have retired somehow indicate that they were in that role for a certain amount of time, and the rest of us were also from inception to present, or whatever the case may be. But keep being able to use that member list as a record of membership as well as current membership.
It's also good to have vacancies on there, because it just, if anyone's curious and goes
Okay.
to it, they can be like, oh, I didn't know I could join, neat, I'm
Mhm.
gonna volunteer
Okay.
to join. Anything else on that? We have 3 other things to talk about, I guess. Or no, we don't, we already talked about future meeting dates. We have 2 more things to talk about. Okay, so discuss environmental study process further. Throw out a descriptive agenda item.
It's not mine. So what do we want to talk about?
I have no idea.
I don't know either. When I read this, I thought it was your line item, Jim.
Yeah.
It certainly sounds like it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Did we leave it open-ended as far as like how much we thought we might want to spend and how many tests we might want to do?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Yeah.
I can report.
okay.
Yeah, I think we left it at, and you were just like, the question was, you know, what do we want to do now? And you said you want me to come back and give you
Yes.
more information.
Okay.
So.
So in looking at the size of the school, the rooms, and everything else involved, it looks like we're running about 14 tests. The scope of work is essentially as it was. I've reconfigured it, got a drawing of the building. I need to put some boilerplate on it for the legalities, and then we should be able to issue. So there's not a whole lot left
That's
for me to bring
significant
up.
for us.
Yeah.
And can we issue before we have a sense of overall budget? I feel like that's a really important discussion.
So, procurement officer, can I give out numbers for costs?
Yeah.
Okay, so at 14 tests, we're in the $20,000 range.
Okay. I'm gonna pull up my draft.
Sure.
Last time it was 25, I
34 to 38 tests, yeah.
And that's each, obviously. 14 tests.
Twice, fall and
Times-
spring?
It would be
Twice.
times 2.
Correct.
All right, so that's good. We saved $10,000 off this budget already. I was
For
holding
20.
25K for spring and 25K for fall.
Okay, so hold on a second. Did you have some?
No.
Okay, then, all right.
I have a question. Since you're holding off, presumably it goes back to the list from before, it was 25. You have put line items of 25 2 times. Can we request further funding, maybe for the environmental study to do it in coincidence with one would, so that we use only 20K, and then since the other one would be 9 months or 6 months further down the line, see if we can get some other funding.
So I would suggest that there is no economy of scale.
Okay.
And you're not authorized to spend
Right.
these funds on Wildwood. So if we want to get additional funding, we certainly can, but it would have to be Fort River specific, and it wouldn't save us anything to put them together or not.
Seems to me that for planning purposes, we should assume the money we've been given is the money we have.
Okay.
And if we're budgeting, we should budget that way. And if we seek other funds, then, I don't know. Good luck to us.
Agreed. So in general, are we satisfied with asbestos, mold and bacteria surface, mold and bacteria air? Are we looking for anything else?
And then the outdoor.
Well, there we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
balances.
Inside and
So what you
Right.
described, just the different numbers,
Right.
at 14 tests, right?
Radon.
Is carbon dioxide part of?
So at each of the individual locations, we're gonna take carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, relative humidity, temperature, and something I'm forgetting.
You brought up radon. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
It's a building on grade. I don't know that I've ever seen any tests associated with this building for radon. I don't have a concern, but it's a cheap test for our consideration.
I haven't seen a lot of radon testing done out here. I'm not sure how typical a problem it is, but I wouldn't be against testing for it.
If it's cheap, then we do
Okay,
it.
and I'll add radon. And I'll add radon as an additive to the contract, so that if we have money, we do it. If we don't, we don't.
So like an add-on if we choose it.
Exactly.
Sounds good.
So what do we have to do to make that happen any further? Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay, so, Anything else then on this? So when's it likely to go on?
So that's the next question. It's March 12th.
Mhm.
So if I take a week to put it together, we have to advertise for 2 weeks. We want it to land in April, May. When do we actually want to run the test? What would be our optimum point for the spring test?
It's a great question. Should we look at some like historic weather data of the
Okay.
like wettest week in April or something? I'm not really sure.
I can do
Would
that.
they be able to advise us about the best testing times?
It's the muddiest, mushiest area
Well,
time of the year in Fort Back.
There's also, I mean, there have been, previous tests done through the years,
Yes.
and I know that they have been at varying
Yes.
times of year, so I don't know,
Comparatively.
yeah.
So we can push it out, our next meeting, I can have it ready, we vote, we put it forward for contracting, we get the person, firm on board, and then we have that conversation, what do they think?
I think that's a good idea. And then also if we had pull the dates of the prior testing,
Sure.
and say there was one in April, then we could choose that same
Coincide.
time.
My only thoughts, and I'm completely naive to the process, is I wonder if we should try to do it before the April break. The April break, things change significantly when there aren't 400 people walking around the building, and
Sure. It might be too much of an air out time.
right.
So
That's
I
a
would,
really good
That sounds wise.
an alternate thought is, we want those 400 people in the building when we
Yes.
do the test.
Right.
We're
So
saying
do
we
it
don't
the-
want a week
Right.
at all to air out
Oh,
and not
I
be.
see,
That's what I'm
I
saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do it prior to April 14th, that Friday that we start breaking.
That'd be tough.
And that'd be tight, I think.
Yes.
That not only sounds wise, but if you just think of, I mean, a lot of us have lived in this area for a while. You can't push this thing out into mid to late May, for example, because
Mhm.
it's just a different season around
Right.
here. If we want it to be wet and potentially moldy and gross, it's got to be. I'm just saying, or not, right? We'll take what the tests tell us.
Okay.
It's got to be in April.
Yeah.
Okay.
So April vacation starts the 14th?
The 14th is the Friday that is the last day, I believe. I can
Okay,
consult the
so it's the
calendar.
12th. So if I send a notice to the Gazette tomorrow, we can have an ad on Thursday and have it out on Thursday, assuming it's done on Thursday.
Okay.
That's the 15th, which means it would be due on the 29th.
Okay.
Is that enough time to execute a contract and get them on board and have the test run in those 2 weeks? Like, it basically gives us
2
2 weeks of contract signing.
And correction, it's the 13th, so we're shy one more day.
Okay. I would think. So help me out with Massachusetts specifics. So this is not a 77C or 7C professional service.
No, this is
It is
a-
a professional services. Under
Yes.
what criteria?
It's 30B, straightforward 30B. It's an IFB process,
Mhm.
so it will be given to the lowest bidder.
We're with you. Understood.
So so if we send a bid opening deadline of 2 p.m. on the 29th, then we will know immediately who the winner is. Theoretically, we can execute very quickly. We don't need to go to council for this dollar value.
Thank you.
And so go back to something you were saying a second ago. Is there a needed vote by this committee to proceed?
I would think there would be.
And it's not on the agenda.
No.
So we would need to vote next week to do this.
Correct.
Does that screw up what you just said on there?
That means that we are now receiving it on the first week of April, whatever that would be. That gives us 1 week to do it.
Okay, so one thing I'd say is, beyond needing to fill out our appointments on the committee, in my personal opinion, editorially, we have an even better reason to meet next week,
Mhm.
is we need to approve this procurement.
Mhm.
So we're not covered by the discuss environmental study process further line item?
No, we're absolutely not.
Just checking.
That's quite a discussion otherwise.
So, just trying to pinch our time.
Yes.
Can we advertise in advance of the documents being available?
We can. It would be weird to do that if I didn't know the date they would become available.
Okay.
Um,
So we'll have to pin down the
Yeah.
meeting. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so, yes.
It's not on this topic, I sense that you're about to move on, or
To
not?
another item on the agenda,
Okay.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's just how we usually roll, right?
just knowing that, that people are gonna have to start leaving soon, there was something that was on last time's agenda that I had to bring up to, like an unanticipated thing, so can I say that now and you can tell me to stop talking? It's about the.
You're usually supposed to do it and then I tell you to stop.
Okay, well, great. So the needs survey email that was supposed to go out, it turns out you cannot send emails out from our group email. So I did not do it because I did not have your permission to do so, but I would like, my proposal is that I can send it out with my email, and then that is used on the Fort River School, and then CC the committee and just do that. So I just want to dot my i's and cross my t's and make sure that you're cool that it's coming out of my email account and not the Fort River School Building Committee email.
So to be clear, that thing we said we wanted Maria to do, we already approved for you to do.
Correct.
You're going to be doing with your email CCing us as opposed to through some other.
Yeah, because we can only
It's a one.
receive.
Yeah, it's a one.
Yeah, right.
Okay, is everyone okay with that?
And I checked with the town and they were just like, yeah, you can't do
Anthony?
that now.
Can I make the suggestion that you make the Fort River email address your reply to
That's fine.
address rather than CCing?
You mean, okay, say.
You can do it in Outlook and insert an email program.
If somebody will tell me, translate what you just said into something that I can do, I'm happy to
So
do
we will
that.
push that offline. Is everyone okay with that occurring though?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone's fine with that.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Great. How, discuss, I love the fact that everything on the agenda, like I always write stuff for the school committee agenda, where it's like, I don't know, like topic, outline, sentence. Like this stuff is all like written conversationally. Discuss how to manage, it's great though, it tells us exactly what we're about to do. Discuss how to manage requests for comments from the press. Whose item is this?
I think it might be related to a comment I made last time when we were discussing the press release and the fact that we all probably got an email from the
Yes.
press.
Yes.
And I think that we needed a spokesperson so that it would be one message out
Right.
and not randomly talking to everybody.
Right.
So the question I think we should discuss how to manage this, and there was a proposal that would be the chair of the committee, but that might be putting too much on the chair. But now we have a vice chair.
Vice chair did not agree to do that as part of the duties.
So
I don't know if this is a good discussion to have with so much of our
Yes.
committee not here.
I don't
Yes.
think it is at all, actually,
Okay.
especially because we're having to figure that next, like the next item of discuss role of chair, sort of like, why would we even make that decision and discuss it with a
Yeah.
partially empty committee and the chair not here?
But did the press release go out? I thought we left it at the end of
the press release I posted on the website, and I sent it to Debbie asking her to send it at least to the schools, to the principals, so that they are out. So those are the things, because on the last meeting it was approved and everyone was okay to post it. So it is on the website. And if you want, I can send it directly to the Gazette, as a journalist, but this is posted on the website.
I would think that we would want to send it to the papers.
So the bulletin,
Okay.
definitely,
Yeah.
at least the
Okay.
bulletin.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the kind of thing that if we never approve this community outreach kind of outline, and it's something I'd like to get back onto an agenda. We kind of flew through it in one meeting and we never had a chance to discuss it.
Sure.
But this is the kind of thing that would be great to have laid out, just like where are we sending our press releases to?
So I just realized, since the chair's not here, I probably have an additional job right now, which is to make sure we appropriately capture the things we said we were going to do today. I mean, apart from what's in the minutes, I recognize them as being the minutes. So put communications out on the agenda for approval. Approve our, what is this thing called, solicitation, RFQ, RFP?
IFB.
IFB, another term,
For the
for
environmental.
environmental. Okay, and then committee composition / appointments. I mean, this is not in any order. 4 would be RFQ draft. would be the next thing. And then,
Managing the press.
and then 5, managing press. Okay.
And just as like a 4B would
Yeah.
be the evaluation committee.
Oh,
For
okay.
the
RFQ draft evaluation committee.
And the managing press, if we can make it a slightly broader discussion about reviewing this community outreach outline.
Oh, that was already,
Yes,
that was
oh,
number
oh,
1.
I'm sorry. Ooh,
Top of the list.
I was not paying attention.
Yeah, but,
Do we, is there trying to get this press release out sooner than later?
It's published, so.
Okay.
It's sort of out
But
already.
It's
Pushing
out,
it.
it's out of, but it's not pushed, but it's out, it's live. It's
Okay,
already-
there is a list in this outreach outline that we have circulated as a draft to push it to the Amherst Bulletin, to the superintendent's newsletter, to the PGO newsletters, to the principals, preschool principals listserv. Those were the 5 spots we identified already, so I don't know if that's something we can push to those places, and if somebody has more suggestions, and then we'll revise that here, and I don't know who, and as part of that is like, the person that will do that is blank. So, I don't know if we can fill that now, or we just can't, we'll leave that task of pushing it until we really talk about this.
Well, you said Debbie already has it, correct?
Debbie
So
already
the last
has
piece
it.
is just the newspaper, just the
Yes.
actual press.
Yes. And then we discussed part of the outline last time. We went through some of those issues last time, the last meeting.
And for this purpose, is it smarter for Debbie to ask the press to publish it because we don't have the press master yet?
Yeah, so that's why I asked Debbie if she can
Okay,
forward it
so I
to
can
the
follow up
school.
with Debbie on that.
okay, so you're gonna follow up with
And we
Debbie.
discussed some of, I think to follow up on you, I think we discussed part of the communications outline last time.
But we can still circle back to it on a future agenda.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else?
No, I'm just recognizing that given this list and the importance of getting out that IFB, that we definitely want to have a meeting next week.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if people haven't responded, Debbie, we have to do that
And we
immediately.
might want to put the IFB at the top of the list so that
Yeah.
people have to disappear.
Oh, this is in no particular order.
Okay, yeah,
to be
just to
clear.
make sure
It was
that,
just making sure that it was
Yeah.
captured, absolutely captured, that we want to talk about the changes plans. In fact, actually, it'll be up to our chair. We might not even discuss it next meeting. I have no idea. These are out of my control. Is there a move to adjourn?
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Aye. Carries unanimously. We are adjourned. Now I get to another.